Of course, talking about the Buddhism in the European part of Russia, we cannot omit the erection and function of the Tibetan Buddhist temple in St. Petersburg, which was the first, perhaps, Buddhist temple in the European part and in Europe, if we don't count Kalmyks. This temple was built partly on political purposes, but also because the Russian government was interested to widen contacts in Asia with local people confessing Buddhism, and also there was the so-called big game, political game of Russia against Britain for the influence in Asia. So Russia needed more contacts and more influence in Asia. When the Dalai Lama 13th ran from Tibet from the British troops, there was the idea that the temple would be built for him and he could find temporal refuge in Russia. The contacts of the 13th Dalai Lama with the Russian Tsars were important, and the mediator was again Agwan Darjiev, who was a kind of ambassador of the Dalai Lama 13th. So it was perhaps his idea, or at least one of his main objectives, to build a decent Buddhist temple in St. Petersburg, which he managed to get permission for, and the building was finished in 1914. Just a few days ago they celebrate the 105 years of the Buddhist temple in St. Petersburg. There was a legend that this temple was a Kalachakra temple, but it's not definite, and I personally do not believe that. When the Dalai Lama 14th came to Russia the first time, and he was told about this temple, which he actually even visited in 1982, I think. He asked me, "Why do you say it's Kalachakra temple?" I didn't know what to say, because that was a kind of legend. But when I tried to find the origins of this legend, I didn't find any. I think it was just for better advertisement of the temple. More than that, usually in the temples, the spirit protector of the temple, which is played at Gongkhang in the upper room of the temple, belongs to the main tradition of the temple. And in case if it were Kalachakra temple, as I understand, it would be a Kalachakra protector. But when I talked to the nephew of Agwan Darjiev, who was visiting this temple together with Darjiev, and who inherited this building from Darjiev even, and he explained me the iconography of this statue which was standing there, it was definitely Hamo. That's quite ordinary and not related to Kalachakra. They had Kalachakra dances performed in the temple during 20s. I'm not sure why it's called Kalachakra and if it is really related to Kalachakra. Anyway, When Darjeev was arrested and died in 1938, the look of his nephew, who officially inherited the temple, immediately wrote a letter to the government that please take this temple and these counter-revolutionary people who live there, and the temple was given to the state. Then it was used for different purposes, as a physical culture base for local people, as a laboratories of the Zoological Institute. During the wartime, there was a radio station there, and only in the 60s, when George Röhrich, who was quite famous in Russia, returned to Moscow, he started to campaign for returning, for giving some better usage to this temple. And it was decided that the temple will be turned into the storehouse of the Tibetan block prints and manuscripts, which were kept in the Oriental Institute. But Röhrich unexpectedly died, and the temple stayed like the laboratories of the Zoological Institute for a long time, until 1987, I think. In 1987, the Leningrad Buddhists, during Gorbachev time already, claimed that temple would be returned to the Buddhist community. And so we have composed documents, applied that Buddhist community is registered in St. Petersburg, and with some difficulties, but still we managed to get it after a year and a half, I think, after we applied. So since that time, it belongs to the local Buddhists.